Let me know if you can hear the stomping upstairs. Can you hear anything?
I could a little bit, but not a whole lot. And that's in I wouldn't have probably noticed had you not said something.
Okay. All right. Well, just let me know if it's getting disruptive. So anyway, hi. Hi, Deb. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Bright and early on a Thursday. I feel like I'm losing track of what day it is.
I know. Yeah. Day 4 of coronavirus sequester, quarantine, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess our topic today was going to be dating during the quarantine, the isolation. I have some thoughts. I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you want to go first or?
No, let's hear yours. I'm ready.
Okay. So I was thinking about this and kind of panic tailspin mode almost a little bit because, when it was coming up, because, I have all these dating clients that they want to get married, they want to find their man and everything. And I've got, my set advice, prescription, how to go about that. And, so I was like, oh my gosh, all this has to change, right? Like, how are you going to meet people? How are you ever gonna, get together with people when you can't even leave your house? So, I mean, I'm still open definitely to some creative ideas on that, but then just sort of sitting with it and thinking about it a little more. I mean, I don't know how creative we need to be because isn't the guy supposed to do the leading and he's supposed to come up with how, to get together, plan the date, right? So I guess we're, leaning on and capitalizing on ideally the masculine ingenuity and, in his motivation. If he wants to see you, he's going to figure out a way to see you and meet you and get to know you and progress the relationship and everything. So that kind of settled me down about a little bit because it's yeah, definitely. We can't lose sight of the dynamic that we're trying to cultivate, right?
Yeah.
If you want a masculine leader in your relationship, you can't just all of a sudden go into that masculine energy and try to solve all the problems and everything. So that was one thought. Yeah, and it was well, that totally makes sense, but then it's the meeting people, even knowing who people are, I think that's the part that needs some tweaking, because obviously we have online dating and all the apps and the websites and everything, and which is amazing, and so all that infrastructure is right there, and so that dynamic might change a little bit, who's online and how do you use the tools that we have. So that's probably going to shift a little bit. We could probably talk about that a little bit, but the only part of my advice that would be changing materially is just being out and about and being open to meeting people, because obviously you can't go out and smile and just go up to a random stranger and talk to someone that, without the proper safety precautions.
Right.
So that's the main part that I see that's going to need to move online. Maybe our smiles now are just completely going to be Facebook, Twitter, dating apps, that kind of thing. But I have other thoughts, but I want to let you talk a little bit. What do you think so far?
I think the next couple weeks, I think you might be right, we'll see a change and a little bit of a spike in the online dating world, considering all this crazy isolation happening. I would say it's definitely the prime time to, if that's something that you're wanting to do, as far as you've been thinking about online dating, or that's an option that you've been curious about trying out, this is definitely going to be the prime time, I feel, because a lot of people are going to probably be more on there, open to the same thing, especially during a period of isolation, because that's when people are going to get lonely. That's when people are going to want that companionship, that company. And yeah, I love what you said about as far as letting the man lead and get creative, because especially during times like this where it is a little bit more difficult to spend time with one another. Being intentional about, like, as far as like the guy being intentional about, well, I'm gonna figure out a way, like you said. That's the best thing ever. As far as like when you're standing in that feminine role and you're letting that man pursue, it's fantastic. It's fun for both sides because like it's innate within us when we experience it and we allow it to love being pursued. And like for a man, it's the same way for a man. It's innate within him to love pursuing. Just love that. But yeah, getting creative. I mean, there's FaceTime too. So it's not always ideal, but if you can get to that point or if you're open to it and you're like, okay, well, we're just going to FaceTime. I've done that before in the past, back when I was dating around, and I don't know, just be open to any path, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that sort of theme of like, you know, when I talk to like married couples, and they have conflict or they have disagreement or whatever, I try to help them shift into, that's not a time to like retreat from your spouse or your partner. That's a time to get closer. So like now when there's little, you know, crisis happening, now's not the time to, you know, get out of your practices and your goals and your ideal self. That's the time to really hone in and tune into it. So if your goal is to be feminine, be led, be protected, like, I mean, that could really enhance that dynamic of like, he can be this, you know, knight in shining armor to like make you feel safe in a time of upheaval. So yeah, so I really like that, like really embracing like what your ideal role is, instead of thinking that because there's a crisis, then that means that we do the opposite. That means that we step away or step out of our ideal role. So yeah, we need to squash that and just and see how to like, where's the opportunity in the problem, instead of where's the, you know, how's it going to hurt everything? How's it, you know, because that mindset's just going to lead you down to definitely less than ideal, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely, I mean, how you said opportunity, that's the perfect word to describe this situation. Because, yeah, we are going to be spending a lot more time together as far as, like, people who are married. And that's a great opportunity to spend time with quality time. Because, I mean, we live in such a fast-paced society now that we never get the chance to slow down. And I think that's a big part of what probably hurts a lot of our relationships. And so now we have that time. So let's rebuild these relationships. Let's strengthen that bond. And that's exactly what we need during this kind of time anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel bad it totally segued right into the topic, but how are you doing in all this? Like, how's your work and everything?
So, I'm actually doing very well, which shows how much I've grown. But I am actually in this transition. So I was planning on moving here, back to Indianapolis. I'm currently in Kentucky. So I was planning on moving back to Indianapolis and getting back into the salon that I opened with my best friend before I moved to Kentucky. She's about to have a baby, so I was going to step in and kind of get myself started back here. And so April 1st was when I was supposed to move here. And I was like, well, because all this coronavirus, like I want to get there sooner, because like if they put any like travel bans or anything, I just want to make sure that I'm just already there, which kind of worked out anyways. I was supposed to finish my the salon that I was working at in Kentucky, but they had actually called me and said, we're closing our doors indefinitely, so get your tools, file for unemployment, blah blah blah. Which is just weird to hear, you know, like that's never something that I would ever experience. So it's like, huh, okay. I think Indiana's going to follow suit. So, and most people clients that I did have already have just been like, I'm going to reschedule my appointment for like, next month or whatever. So it's an interesting time. I was pretty well prepared for it. So,
Good.
and my boyfriend has been a super support. So that takes all of that stress, because I've allowed him to be that provider and protector and that reassurer.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been really good for me. So
that's great. Yes, I love it. Yeah, I feel the same way, that it's like there are so many opportunities and like just things that you never thought were even possible. Now they're going to be possible. Like it's crazy. But yeah, that's so great that you're able to lean on him, because when so like have you ever read The Power of Habit?
I have not.
It's a really good book, and in my like group coaching program, we're reading that this month. And he talks about how like habits are formed and everything, and they get so ingrained. And then when you try to create new habits, it's you can practice, but it's under times of stress that you're going to revert back to your old habit. So to be able to like, I guess, being aware of that and being prepared for that is helpful. Like, okay, I know what my old pattern is, and I know there's some stress coming up, so I'm going to be ready to go the right direction this time instead of going back to that. So that's really good that even with all this stuff going on, that you're able to lean into your like new habits.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. And just like for me, I feel like the biggest thing, like at the root of a lot of stuff, is the need, and this is especially for women. So I feel like, I can't speak for everyone, but I do feel like this is kind of innate. Women have that natural inclination to try and control things. And so that was the one thing that I was like, I'm going to work on this. Because that's what caused a lot of that fear and that anxiety that comes from a place of, you just want to control. And I love, like, honestly, this whole situation I've just loved, because it's kind of one of those things where you have to learn that you're not in control. It's like, it's just one of those things that, you have to realize and accept that you only have control over XYZ. Like this is what you have control over, and then the rest you got to just let go. Because you can choose to be anxious and fearful and try to control things, or you can just sit back and you can just trust that it's all going to work out the way that it's supposed to, and that, there's no point in getting yourself all worked up and upset, because that's not, who wants to feel that way?
Yeah. So it's like the universal, like the external factors, like the coronavirus. It's like, it's very obvious you can't control that, and so you have to, but like you can recognize that and let it let that lesson spill over into other areas where you might think that you can take control, and you're just hurting yourself or being counterproductive when you do it. It's like, well, maybe I should try letting go and feel that ease of not controlling things. Yeah, it's crazy how that works.
Yeah, it's definitely a perfect like parallel between just life and your relationships. It kind of functions in a similar, way, which is really neat and interesting. I feel like there's little hidden gems in life like that everywhere. Just learning the lessons, making connections.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one other, so the other thought that I had about dating and how to meet people in this situation is maybe, again, sort of, we've got all this technology, which is wonderful, but while we're looking at like the kind of traditional or like throwback, innate, whatever you want to call it, like gender roles or the traditional way of like getting to know and meet people, is maybe through more careful vetting, because that's kind of one of the things that's been, it's been a little bit, I don't know what the word is, like unsettling about all the technology and about how our generation or these recent generations are like just increasingly just on your own and just kind of thrown out there to meet people and figure out relationships all on our own. Well, maybe now's a good time to try to reconnect with how that used to happen, which was your family and your friends would fix you up and tell you who's out there and what's their background, and you can figure things out with their help and their support instead of all alone. And so that was my other thought about, like, if you can't be out in public, like maybe your being out in public is just talking to your friends. Maybe that's talking more to the people you already know and trying to expand your circle through them instead of just all alone, you know, out in the great wilderness of online dating.
Good point. Especially, I mean, that's like, I feel like our little corner of Twitter, whatever you want to call it, you know, everybody's pretty decent, like, relationships with everyone. And so, you know, there's a handful of people that I would trust to reach out and be like, hey, like, do you know of anybody that would possibly be a good, you know, fit or anything like that? And a lot of people might feel uncomfortable doing that because it is going out of, I mean, you are kind of putting yourself out there in a way, but you're asking somebody trusted, and you'll get a better result than just kind of swimming out in the entire sea with no direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I advise that anyway. Like I, you know, it's like, it's similar. It's not quite like, but it's very similar to looking for a job. And it's like, you don't, if you need to, you know, make an income and you don't, you know, you need to make a change with your situation, then you put your feelers out. You don't hide it and like pretend it doesn't exist. Like, so again, with the opportunity, I think this is an opportunity, or like being single, trying to find your person. And I just don't want anybody to like let this be a reason to put their dreams and goals on hold. You know, so like, where's the opportunity? Well, if I, you know, if I feel bashful or embarrassed to like talk to people, then maybe this is a chance to like strengthen those skills and those relationships, to network and talk to people, and like even get closer with your family. Like if you've got relatives across the country or whatever you haven't talked to a whole lot, then now's your chance to let them know what's going on in your life and tell them that you're looking for help and do they have any ideas. And not all of them are going to pan out, obviously, but you just got to put those feelers out, because you can't know the future. You can't choose exactly how the path is going to go, or you're just limiting yourself. So
exactly. Being open to receive is huge. So huge.
Yes.
You said something that made me think of something, and I was like trying to hold it in my brain.
Oh, darn.
I do all the time. But I love that. Like, it's not, you can't be passive with it. I like how you said it's like looking for a job. You can't just sit back and be like, oh, I'll find a job. Like somebody's just gonna call you up one day and be like, hey, I have this job for you. I mean, that might happen. It's possible, but the probability of that is very, very low. So if you're wanting to get married, or you're wanting to find, you know, that partner to have in your life, most like the probability of them just knocking on your door saying, here I am, is very, very small. So it's not passive. It's very intentional about, you know, putting your feelers out there, being open to receive, making those connections, being like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And honestly, if I would have said, and this is just from my experience, my perspective, because this is not everyone's, but if I were to have told my family or asked for help and been like, hey, like, this is what I'm looking for, I think a lot of people in today's society are instructing their kids to, oh, you're young, like, don't worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that all the time, and like, I have wanted to get married since I was 18. Like, that's been my desire. That's what I've wanted. And for the longest time, people would say, oh, you're so young, don't worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
You have, like, you focus on a career, especially with all, like, feminism being such a thing today. And I was just told all of these things, like the exact opposite of what my desires were. So I felt like I was almost wrong for feeling the way that I felt, which is like very unfortunate, and nobody should ever feel that way. Don't let anybody ever tell you that the way that you feel is not valid, because it is. But yeah, I just, it's very intentional. When you start being intentional and you start being open to receiving, and you, like the last conversation that we had, sticking to your value, knowing your values and sticking to them, that's how you get there. That's how you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of this, you know, I can kind of hear the objections now, you know, it's like, oh, but I'm not close with my family, or I'm not, you know, whatever they might be. It's just like all of this, like putting yourself out there, like learning new habits, forming connections, receiving, allowing people to help you and asking for help. All of that is really good practice for your relationship. Like, it's all skills you need for your relationship. So don't think that you can just be lazy and settled into like, oh, well, this is who I am. Like, no, we all need to be growing all the time. And saying, well, that's just who I am, is gonna really hurt your relationship if you get to one. So you might as well start now practicing. I'm gonna grow and keep growing and always be learning new things and strengthening new skills, and that will serve you. Like, that's not just a skill for dating or for finding a job. It's for when you actually get there, you need to be in that same mindset already.
Yes, that is so important. And I love that you know, said that, because it really is. Something that a lot of people don't like to hear is, like, you know, I've said some stuff along the lines of, and I've said it a million different times, worded it different ways. Certain ways I word it trigger people, others don't. But talking about being, like, working on yourself first, because if you don't, I don't like to say, if you love yourself, if you don't love yourself, then how are you going to love a partner? Or how are they going to love you if you don't love yourself? And you have to work on yourself. You have to grow. You have to learn. You have to be, the one that I say a lot is, like, if you're not happy on your own, you're not going to be happy with somebody else.
Right.
And people don't like to hear that, but I mean, it's the reality. I mean, if you're not happy unless you're in a relationship, then your happiness is dependent on someone else being in your life. And to a degree, I mean, of course, we all thrive better in relationship, because that's how we're created. We're relational creatures. So yes, it's ideal to have someone to work with in that way, in that dynamic, but you want to be it in a healthy way, not a destructive way, which is why it's important that we have that awareness, and we do grow as individuals before we enter into that next phase where we have that relationship with somebody else.
Yeah. And I totally see where people are coming from. Just like you said, like, yeah, you want the relationship, and you're going to feel like, you know, ideally you're going to kind of be a better person in the relationship than you were alone. But it's a fine line, because if you think that someone else or something else is what you need to be happy, then that's gonna sabotage your relationship. Like, you're not gonna have it for very long. So if you want to keep it, then you have to have that mindset of, like, I make myself happy, and I choose happiness, and then the circumstances follow, as opposed to the reverse, that you get more of what you want when you choose happiness. You don't get the happiness because you got what you wanted. So
right. And it's not easy at all. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you that I myself, you know, for the longest time, I was very because of the childhood that I had, I was very dependent on, I felt like I needed, let's say, I felt like a relationship validated that I am loved, if that makes sense. So I held my worth in that. So if I didn't have somebody that wanted to be with me, then I didn't have worth. And so because of that, I was in a lot of just these relationships that weren't necessarily, they weren't like bad. Like I never had any, like, most of the relationships I had have been with really awesome men. But I wasn't happy myself, so I couldn't bring what I needed to bring into the relationship to make it thrive.
Right.
And so it was hard, for a long time. So I was like, I kind of isolated myself, and I lived on my own for like a year and a half, and really focused on, okay, I'm going to make it to where, like, I'm good on my own. Like, I wanted to prove that to myself. And it was hard. I mean, for a long time, it was a lot of nights in my apartment, just on my knees praying to God, because it was so hard for me. And eventually you get to a point where you start recognizing that, like, yeah, I don't know. I had to speak truth of myself. So it was like repetitive. A lot of people say, positivity doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Like, that doesn't fix things. And at first, like, I was repeating these positive affirmations to myself. And it was like, I didn't believe it. I was saying it, but I knew I didn't believe it. But then I said it enough and repetitive over and over and over until I got to a point where I started to. And that reprogramming those thoughts, because you can't hold two thoughts in one space. So if you have a negative thought that comes in, like, it's just replacing that. And it was like, it's difficult. I mean, it's a hard process. It's exhausting. It's a lot of work. But it's worth it, because now that I put all of that effort into growing myself, into breaking out of all that self-destructive just feedback loops in my mind, I am now having thriving relationships in every area of my life. And so that's such an important component that I think a lot of people might overlook or downplay.
Yeah.
But like you said, this is just how I am.
Yeah.
And we definitely don't want to have that mindset, because that's definitely not a healthy foundation to bring into a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said about how I want to pull it apart a little bit, what you said about having that time to yourself to work on yourself. It wasn't even so much, in my opinion, it's not even so much that that, like, saying the words or the time to yourself is not necessarily what convinced you to love, to believe those affirmations. It's putting in the effort. It's like,
yeah,
the fact that I did something hard because I knew it was best for me. That's how you convince yourself that you love yourself, by doing those things.
Yep.
Because you can't just tell someone that you love them and then, smack them across the face, and like the actions have to match up.
Right.
And so same thing with yourself. And that was something that was so hard for me to get, was like, why does everybody keep telling me to love myself? Like, that doesn't do anything. Like, that doesn't help me, but it's the actions that prove to yourself. You can't go along, just like we talked about last time, that you have to align with your values. Like, you can't go along abusing yourself and also saying I love myself. You're not going to believe it. It's not, you can't trick yourself that way. So but yeah, I like, and then what you said about that preparing you for your relationship is like, yeah, now you're in the habit of doing hard things that you're going to need to be able to do in your relationship, because they're not always easy. And I think that's a big misconception that people have, is like, when they see someone in a successful relationship, that they think everything's easy and it's always been easy, and like, oh yeah, you're pretty, or you're like whatever. But it was the willingness to do the hard things and go through that pain of like, I'd rather just be like, doing what's easy. I'd rather just be watching TV or whatever, like, and let everything come to me. Well, yeah, of course, but that's not how you get into the successful patterns. And yeah, so I think some people, they think they can't do something hard. If it's hard, then that means there's something wrong with them. No, it's normal. It's normal for things to be hard.
Absolutely normal for things to be hard.
Yeah.
I think that's vital to our whole existence, is doing hard things.
Yep, definitely.
That's
so thanks, universe, for giving us something hard to do that we we have no choice.
Yeah, we don't, so we might as well. But that's the beauty in it, like even the hard things, like birth, amazing thing. Like it's just, how do I want to phrase this? I can't even phrase it because I'm just so excited about it in my head.
Yeah.
But like, even so, like, for example, childbirth, like, that is painful. That is not an easy thing to do. That's very difficult. But it creates life and so much beauty afterwards, and just tears of joy and happiness. And that's like the perfect metaphor for life in general. Like, life is hard. There's gonna be things that are painful, but there's so much beauty and life, and it's awesome.
That really is the perfect metaphor. Yes, because like, I don't think you've been through childbirth, but I have. So, and if you read birth stories, like, a common theme that like comes up every single time, pretty much every single time, and midwives can tell you this, that they watch a woman to see how far and how close she is to, having the baby and actually giving birth when they're in labor, and all the stages of labor going on. They watch all these signals, and you always know that the baby's just about to come when the mother says, I can't do this, and she wants to give up. Like, every single time she's gonna want to give up and be like, no, let's stop now, this is not happening, I can't do it. That like moment is like always what comes right before the actual birth. So
wow.
Yeah, so I think that's a great metaphor. It's like, if you can hear yourself saying, I want to give up, that's the moment right before the creation and the birth of something new. So
that's awesome. See, I love that. That's great stuff. I don't even have anything to add to that. That was just awesome. I get so excited thinking about just like I don't know, that's just amazing. I don't know, lately I've been thinking about that a lot, so that's just been a topic that's been coming up in my life a lot lately, just like bearing children. And every time I talk to somebody about it, I'm just like, that's so awesome, because I mean, I haven't experienced that myself, but that is something that is a goal of mine, and I'm looking forward to, God willing, someday. So just talking about it is so exciting and terrifying, but
yes. Oh, it's so exciting. Yeah, you don't want to get me started on that topic. We'll be here all day. Maybe next chat.
That'll be something. But yeah.
All right, cool. Anything else you want to add?
No. Trying to think if we covered everything that you wanted to cover. I know you had kind of
I think that was everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, it was a good chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes. It's always a good time.
Yeah, and I'm going to be recording some, I do it live, but then replays also for my group coaching program. So I'm going to post up all that good information too. And so good luck with your move and everything.
Thank you. Yep, I'm crossing my fingers that maybe they'll be out sooner and I can move in, and I can quarantine myself in my house and have a consistent space.
It'll all go the way it's supposed to. It'll work out. So.
Yep, it will.
Well, I'm sure we'll be in touch. So I'll see you on Twitter.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.